For years in Alexandra Township, young girls as young as 14 years old, women and couples, fell prey to two serial rapists hiding in balaclavas. The men would rob, rape, kidnap, and force couples to have sex with each other.
And then
often when we arrested these suspects in the past, their family, their co-workers, their employers said there's no way it could be this individual.
Count 14, rape, life imprisonment.
Late last year, the men were sentenced, bringing their almost decade-long reign of terror to an end. But they leave behind a trail of destruction and their loved ones questioning who they really were. North of Johannesburg, a stone's throw away from Sandton, is the township of Alexandra. It's a densely populated melting pot of nationalities. This park in Alex, now derelict, dirty, and mainly used as a thoroughfare by locals, is situated on a riverbank next to a cemetery. The park once served as a recreational space for couples wanting privacy. One afternoon in November 2013, 19-year-old Tebogo, not her real name, and her boyfriend spent some time at the park.
That time being matric, so Saturday yakona being cross nights in school, and then that day in Tamba manga decided to ishitsing ngishaywa umoya ephakeni because sasa ngiyabhala, and then sahamba sahlala ephakeni.
Tebogo and her boyfriend left the park but later returned, only to be confronted at gunpoint by a man in a balaclava. He robbed them of their valuables and then told them to exit the park through a nearby cemetery. They complied, but it didn't end there. He then gave them the runaround, instructed them to lie down and searched them, deliberately delaying them so they would be more vulnerable in the dark.
And then masukudak so wathi kithi sikhethe ukuthi sihamba singokuya emakhaya noma siyalalana khona la emathuneni. Then thina sathi kuya waphendula mina ngathi mina hayi ngcono silalane because angeke sihambe singoku, and then athi kuthi okay. Maqeda lapho wasikhomba ngesibhamu wathi silalane because lo muntu bengihamba naye umfana. Sathi kuye siqedile wathi okay isilale phansi futhi uzositshela ukuthi sihambe. Salala phansi wasivala ngeyikipa ebusweni. Wathi sithathe ikipa zethu sizivale ngazo. Maqeda lapho wathi wakhomba mina ngesibhamu la emuva wathi ngivuka. Ngavuka wathi kimi ngikhetha nokuthi adubule lo muntu ambulale or alale nami. Ngathi mina hayi angazi. Wathi kimi ngcono ngikhumule alale nami. Wangicela ngikhombe ngesibhamu wathi if ngamemeza la uzongidubula sibulale. Maqeda lapho ngakhumula and then alala nami.
The rape happened at distance from her partner, and only after they were released, the trauma of what had happened hit her.
Mina bengithukile sahamba because lo muntu bengihamba naye bekangazi ukuthi ongirepile because uthe kimi ngingakhulumi. So yena wamangala sengikhala wangibuza ukuthi kanti yena bekacabanga ukuthi ngithukile, ngamtshela ukuthi ngathi mina masambe eclinic phela lo muntu lo ongirepile.
When reporting the crime at the police station, she discovered she wasn't the first victim of the balaclava rapist. In fact, she says, police told her he was a wanted suspect.
Ngafila bad because ngacabanga ukuthi shukuthi ayigcinanga ngami ezingacalanga ngami shukuthi khona abanye abantwana azobalimaza and maybe abanye ngeke babe nenhlanhla njengami angababulala.
The balaclava rapist was 38-year-old Sinja Mabitsela. He operated alone for close to a decade before being joined by an accomplice, 50-year-old Josias Xaniseka Mkansi. They both lived opposite the park. It's unclear how they knew each other before they became accomplices.
they used to, scan the environment. At one stage, they used to go and try to sit in the park so that the victims, when they walk through the park, they have an advantage. They've been here before, so they know how the setup looks like. So then they pounce on unsuspecting victims and disarm them or rob them of whatever they are good they are having and rape them. So what they used to do is they were wearing balaclavas. That's one operandi they used to do. And they were actually carrying guns as well. Okay, just to show that the reason they are wearing balaclavas, we suspected that is because they were staying not far from the park itself in the cemetery. So they knew that the victims might be able to identify them.
According to some media reports, over 100 cases of rape in a 3-kilometer radius of Alexandra had been reported at the police station with the same modus operandi. Seemingly without any action, the police didn't want to comment on this, but simply said catching these two men wasn't easy.
The only route we could take was actually to go and try to arrest them, while they are out there in the park. So at one stage, we went over to search for the park, to try and see maybe can't we strike it lucky on the day. So, in that incident, the discharge of firearms, we realized actually those were the guys that were actually, involved, but they disappeared into the darkness.
Elizabeth Mukwena is the director of the Alexandra Kids Clinic, where they work closely with rape victims. Her organization arranged a march against the rapists and the scourge of violence against women. When Mkansi and Mabitsela's raping spree continued unabated, the community of Alex even sought intervention from the authorities.
We organized a march. We marched. We started at Penn and we marched around Alex and we came to this park. Then we handed over the memorandum to the councillor who took the memorandum to the mayor's office.
Police traced the men, who were apprehended a year apart, through the victims' stolen cell phones, which the perpetrators had given away. It was also through voice recognition from an ID parade and DNA tests that the men were caught.
We actually rely on other factors like DNA, for instance. It takes a bit of time for the results to come through. And we also needed to make sure that when we start to act, we actually act and apprehend the right criminals as it has happened in this case. And we also rely on victims and witnesses, stuff like that. So it's quite a massive process. And ultimately, they were apprehended. So I think justice is served, even though we would have loved to do it much more quicker. But we're happy with the results of the day.
The arrest of the perpetrators brings relief, but very little comfort for survivors like Debogo, who is yet to receive proper counseling. She's still picking up the pieces. She failed her matric and her relationship with her boyfriend ended.
I think wamphatha because ever since asikaze sakhuluma ngayo ukuthi wena ufile kanjani ngayo or mina ngifile kanjani ngayo. But I think ukuthi yamphatha yagcina i-affecta ne-relationship yethu because sagcina sis-break up because mina ngagcina ngithi angisafili comfortable Alex because mangimile egeyidini lasekhaya I can see lapha emathuneni. So ngagcina ngihamba mina la Alex ngiyohlala nosisi wami.
For years, the community of Alexandra was terrorized by 2 balaclava serial rapists. Debogo was one of the victims.
Before bengumuntu othanda ukuzihambela nabangani bami, but then after bengithanda ukuhlala endlini, shoot bengizitshela ukuthi hayi ngithanda ukuba indoors because vele abantu abazi ngithi kwayenzakalani. So ngazitshela ukuthi ukuphumela ngapha especially ukuhamba ebusuku bese ngine-fear vele ukuthi ngihambe ebusuku unless ifike ngibuye esontweni, but ukuhamba nje ebusuku ngiyasaba.
The case started in the Alexandra Magistrates Court but moved to the South Gauteng High Court due to the serious nature of the crimes and the high number of victims. The trials ran separately. State Advocate Michelle Bayard says this case wasn't an easy one.
And the challenge that I experienced in respect of that matter was the witnesses didn't want to testify. They felt that if they gave a statement to the police, that was the end of the matter, they've done their part. But they didn't realize that they had to go to court to testify. And the underage victims, I had encountered various problems with their parents. And I don't blame them because they want to protect their child and they don't want their child to go through the process. So I had to counsel parents, I had to counsel victims, in addition to preparing them for the court case.
Sinja Mabitsela pleaded guilty to all 23 counts of rape, 5 counts of compelled rape, which is when couples are forced to have sex, 17 counts of robbery with aggravating circumstances, and 2 counts of kidnapping. Josias Mkansi, on the other hand, pleaded not guilty and denied any involvement. He was convicted of 14 counts of rape and 2 of compelled rape, as well as a further 11 charges, which include kidnapping, assault, and theft with aggravating circumstances.
We don't often get teen rapists, so to have 2 suspects engaged in a process of rape, let alone serial rape, is not the common pattern of what we see. The majority of serial rapists are operating alone. Same with the serial murderers. So how do these 2 people meet? And that's sort of the question. And how do 2 people meet that have the same ideas about woman or about rape and are prepared to take that step? So it is just, unfortunately, you can almost say it's a match made in hell that you find 2 people who are prepared to engage in that behavior together.
Professor Gerard Labeskagni is a criminologist who was responsible for the pre-sentencing reports on Mkansi and Mabitsela.
So one of the questions people often ask is, why do people end up doing this? What went wrong? Is there a pattern that we can see that gives us warning signs? The sad reality is, and this is also why these things are often quite scary for society, there's no clear warning signs. There's something we just don't understand about why is it that one person develops this, but someone who grew up in the same household with the same food, the same discipline, isn't committing serial rape.
Some of South Africa's worst serial rapists include Ananias Mate, Mpora Khwale, Sikhangele Mki, Simon Sithole, to name but a few. Professor Labeskagni says the profile of a serial rapist includes the fact that they tend to operate in a small geographical area and that the crime scene area where they meet and rape their victims is either an area they live or work in. They have a preferred victimology, which is a preference for similar types of victims. Serial rapists are difficult to rehabilitate and cannot be cured. They will carry on with their criminal activities until they get caught. In the case of the balaclava rapists, Mabitsela was married and was a father of 4 children. He was practicing as Isangoma. In 2003, he was convicted of being in possession of an unlicensed firearm and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Mkansi was also a father to several children. At the time of his 2015 arrest for the serial rapes, he was out on parole for a murder conviction.
Definitely from a risk perspective, when we do a sentencing report, any previous criminal behavior, even if it's non-sexually related, firearms, robberies, is a risk increaser for your sexual offending behavior.
But Mkansi's son, Prince, believes the person his father has been painted as couldn't be further from the truth.
Themela umuntu ogrand liphila nabantu ogrand nehlonipha abantu nama mistake uyayenza angithi umuntu naye uyaphila uyayenza ama mistake anonabantwana abaningi.
Although he didn't live with his father, Prince believes the man was too busy working and providing for his family to get up to such crimes.
But angiboni ukuthi rape izomsiza ngani because bekana abafazi abaningi nami ngumntwana wakhe mara bengazi abomamncane bami ngiyabazi bonke abengekho indlela ukuthi angazi ayo rape nabantwana abancane. Ngisho nami manga ngithola bekazi girlfriend yami one angithola nomunye umuntu bekakwata athi why kwamele uzoba nabantu abaningi life yakho yazi ukuthi uzohlupheka 1 2 3 but yena kuza kanjani ukuthi uyacabanga ukuyo rape.
So if we look at our serial offenders in general, and I mean by that specifically serial murderers and serial rapists, what often is difficult for people to understand or society to understand, and which is what makes them very fearful, is that they are not living this criminal lifestyle. You know, if they were robbing banks and beating up people and getting drunk on the weekends and domestic violence, one wouldn't perhaps be so surprised if you add on serial rape on top of that. But these individuals tend to live very normal lives. They're not really involved in a criminal lifestyle. They have relationships that going reasonably well in many instances. They have children that they care about. So it's almost as if you have this double life that runs parallel to a very, very normal life. So often when you arrested these suspects in the past, their family, their co-workers, their employers say there's no way it could be this individual, because they do live a very, very normal lifestyle for the most part, and they're not doing what we'd expect when you suddenly find out that they're having committed serial rapes.
The NGO, Women and Men Against Child Abuse, followed the case closely.
We must also know that all the women and girls were raped without a condom. So although we were able to use DNA in that way, but we must also know that they never cared about issues around STDs, HIV, and pregnancy, and knowing that some of the younger girls were virgins at the time. And in fact, they actually asked their age, and they didn't care. So we know we are talking about absolutely ruthless, cold-blooded rapists here that had absolutely no concern for what they were doing. They were actually prepared to cause this amount of trauma to these very young girls.
In the case of Josias Mkansi, that was accused number 1, there was no remorsefulness at all. From the word go, he said it wasn't him. Even after being found guilty, sometimes after an accused is found guilty, he's able to appreciate the overwhelming evidence that was presented, and he can now ask for the court's mercy, because that is what sentencing is about. But Mr. Mkansi was adamant. He even took the stand during sentencing, and I cross-examined him, and he said point blank, it's not me, I will not accept responsibility. And you know, he was 50 years old at the time of sentencing, and obviously at the commission of these crimes, he was in his late 40s. So he's such an old, mature man, you know, one would not expect a person of that age to commit such brutal crime. Mr. Mabitsela, on the other hand, I'm still saying that he did not show true remorse. He played the remorse because he wanted a lighter sentence. It's all well that he pleaded guilty. I appreciate that he didn't put the victims through testimony and all of that. But you need to show true remorse and not just do it out of regret for being caught.
It is in the public interest that the accused be removed from society for a period of time in order for him to undergo programs in prison. However, how successful those programs will be will depend on the accused himself. I therefore sentence the accused to the following. On count 1, rape, life imprisonment. On count 2, kidnapping, 5 years imprisonment.
In November 2017, serial rapist Sinja Mabitsela was sentenced to 32 life sentences plus 270 years behind bars. The previous month, in October, his co-accused Josias Mkansi had been sentenced to 14 life terms and 185 years. Before sentencing Mabitsela, Judge Carla van Veenendaal took into account the experiences of the male victims who had also been compelled to rape the woman they were with at gunpoint by the balaclava rapists.
He was first forced to rape his girlfriend and then was made to witness her being raped by the perpetrator. He can vividly remember that the attacker wore a balaclava. He can remember what the perpetrator said to him. He can remember being struck on his head with the back of a firearm. The jacket was thrown over his head while his girlfriend was raped. He only disclosed to his brother what had happened. He still suffers from flashbacks. Currently, his profession allows limited social interaction. It would appear that his solace is his profession, although it may have too much emphasis in the circumstances. He has never undergone trauma counseling and worked through his emotions and dealt to a certain extent with his emotions through his own determination and grit.
Both rapists were also put on a sexual offenders register.
It's not really a victory for me personally. Obviously, if I prosecute a matter, it is good if I get a conviction. But I think it's more of a victory for the victims, because you must remember it's a very traumatic experience and the lasting effects are maybe for the rest of their lives. But me being able to convict these two guys, these two accused, can help in the healing process, you know, to a certain extent. And if that happens, and if I can see this victim has now received some form of closure, that makes me happy. So it's more a victory for the victims than for myself, you know. I'm just glad that I was able to prove my case beyond reasonable doubt and get the court to see that the accused were guilty, and then make sure that justice is done for the victims in the matter.
Sekubhetha cause I think sesi-safe manje lapha ephakeni cause labantu laba sebabatholile, and then yeah, I think bayitholile nabo i-punishment yabo.
This one yena ke, I think nje faneka ahlale nje ejele nje akavakashi for a long time. Ahlale nje, I don't know, makahlale forever if it's possible, because of it's not only my younger sister that she did. If we count ladies, there are so many.
There is no reliable data on compelled rape in South Africa. Compelled rape is when a perpetrator forces a person to sexually penetrate someone else against their will. Experts say the crime commonly plays out in situations like hijackings and robberies. It's a difficult crime to report because of the additional shame and humiliation both victims experience. In terms of the law, the male victim who is forced to rape under duress is not charged. Compelled rape is a charge on its own.
So compelled rape, it's not the most common form of rape that we see, but obviously it was enough of an issue that the legislature thought we have to have a specific crime in the 2007 Sexual Offences Act called compelled rape. So clearly there was enough of it happening that somebody felt that we need to have a specific crime dealing with that. So if we look at our series, where I have come across it mostly, I would probably say maybe 5% of series we're going to have compelled rape as a feature at some point in a series of rapes.
In the case of the balaclava rapists, it was never established why the two forced male companions to rape their female companions. In some instances, the women and men were related. There are, however, possible pathological explanations.
It can be, for example, to try and influence forensic evidence. Mixtures of DNA are a bit more complicated when it comes to forensic analysis. But then you'd usually expect that the person has a little bit more insight into the role that forensics plays and how to interfere with forensic evidence. The other side of it could be more for their own psychological need. It might be part of a sexual fantasy that they have. It could be about power and control over that individual. So there's sort of the two spectrums. The one is the more psychological, and the one is the more forensic evidence tampering.
The Alexandra balaclava rapists and their reign of terror is a painful chapter that this community has finally been able to close. The two men leave behind loved ones who to this day cannot fathom who they really were.
I understand, and there is no way to understand until maybe in a time I'm linked to but ngiyamthemba because angazange ngitshela manga before. Angazi manje why. If abanga lezi zinto angitshela zona, I don't know, but angazange ngitshela manga before.
The men also leave behind a trail of destruction. Many victims have never been able to go back to the park again. The depth of damage that they caused can never fully be quantified because not all victims report rapes. So many of their victims remain unknown.
Some of the young girls have not been able to continue with school, have not been able to continue with university or extra work that they were doing. In the meantime, some of the boyfriends have left, companions. One of the cousins has left. He's no longer in Alex. He can't be around the area anymore.